Last time we talked about 5 reasons you probably don't need a 5-string, but this time I'm going to go into 5 things that you can only do on 5-string bass. First up, we're talking about the upper register of the low B string. The thing that excites me about 5-string bass is not so much the extended range as the extended timbres. When you play up in this register of the bass, there's a certain thickness to it that you don't necessarily get down here. And so when you make use of the upper range of the low B string, you can make certain keys sound different than they would on a 4-string. Here's my A on the low B string. And if I were to play that on the E, you can hear on the 4th string it's a bit more focused, which can be helpful at times. But in certain kinds of music and in certain moments, it's great to make use of that extra thickness. I find this is super helpful in hip hop where you just want to drop heavy bombs. Also, a lot of the time for the ends of songs, if you want a big, fat, warm final note, you can get that there in ways that you can't necessarily get here, even if you play differently along the fingerboard. So a running theme here is how important it is to make judicious choices with the tools you have in your arsenal. And I find that our ear can immediately pick up on when you are below the range of a standard bass or guitar. We've had about 100 years now of hearing guitars tuned down to E and roughly 70 of the electric bass. And whether or not you can identify it, you feel when something is out of that range. So I'm going to call this one number 1.5. Because technically, as we explored last time, it's something you can do on 4-string. And that is making careful choices about when to use the extended range. There's a video from Beatles Anthology where Paul McCartney talks about when they were recording Free as a Bird, how he decided to use 5-string bass for one note alone, a low C, at the start of the bridge. This is the godfather of pop bass arranging. This is Mr. Sgt. Pepper, and he could have played his Hofner or his Rick or anything he wanted, but he chose for this song to use a 5-string, not throughout the song, but just for one moment, one low C. I think that gives us insight into how you can use extended range as a tool in pop arranging. Last time we talked about how using subharmonics and drop tuners can make you be judicious in your choices as to when to deploy those tools. But you can do that on a 5-string as well, as long as you utilize restraint. Okay, so what about those moments that don't earn the deep bombs, the low range, that don't necessarily justify those choices? Something I love that you can do on 5-string is slide up on the low B, even if your target notes are on the 4th string. It doesn't trigger our ear to the weight in the same way as when you say, I'm going to play a low D, but it can evoke a lot of excitement to hear the rumblings of the low range and still land on a note that's within standard range. This is a great way to hint that you've got some extra power down there without playing your cards too soon when it comes to the low notes. Number 3, we're going to talk about subtle passing tones that you can just sprinkle into your playing. This is another way of using the low range without abusing it, and also without playing your cards too soon when it comes to those low notes. So for example, if we're in the key of G, occasionally utilizing the low string, I find is a really effective way to catch the ear in strange ways without, again, playing your cards too soon. Can you even utilize this when you're still staying within standard range? Because you can play a 5th in B flat or B or C in ways that doesn't have the same thickness as when you'd be playing it down here on 4-string. Versus if I were to play this in 1st position, which is what you'd have to do on a 4-string, it's more focused for sure and doesn't have the same kind of thud to it. Next, one of the most exciting parts for me on the neck of any bass is the 2nd fret lowest string. And I think you'll find that some of the heaviest riffs are in F sharp for that reason. Immigrant Song, Bulls on Parade. I think it's something to do with the intersection of focus and weight. 1st fret notes, always to my ear, have a little bit of awkwardness to them. But 2nd fret notes you can really let vibrate. So what happens when you have that on a 5-string? You've got the key of C sharp minor or D flat major. It has a whole new dimension to it that you can't find on 4-string. It's really nice to be able to dig into a low C sharp from the bowels of hell, as my friend Don Falcaro says. And lastly, last time I talked about how much it irks me when bassists abuse the fifth string, just making use of it not as a choice. But the truth is that sometimes abusing the fifth string, if the music calls for it, if the song calls for it, the band, the context, sometimes just living down there, as obnoxious as it can be an effective choice in its own right. So there you have it. We talked about 5 reasons you probably don't need a 5-string, and also 5 things you can only do on 5-string. I think what a lot of it comes down to is making concrete choices about when to deploy the tools in your arsenal. And maybe another time we'll talk about how in the studio you can keep that in mind when writing parts per song. In the meantime, is there anything you hate or love about 5-string that I haven't covered here? Feel free to leave it in the comments. Thanks, till next time.